Hi guys, it's Debbie, and finally last night I watched Killers of the Flower Moon, one of the biggest films of 2023, a film people have been talking about for years by one of the biggest directors working at the moment, Martin Scorsese. And it was intense, not all in a good sense, but there is a lot to unpack, so let's get to things step by step. And there is one big premise I think is necessary, and which is the same I made for Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. Directors on the scale of Nolan, Scorsese, Tarantino, Wes Anderson seem to always get this free pass by which we praise their films or at least hype them up to oblivion just on the basis of the name of the director, often even before they're released. So as I said in my Oppenheimer review, I try to watch Nolan's films in the most unbiased manner possible because he won't always be infallible. And that is just Chris Nolan. The love people have for Scorsese is on a whole different level. I mean, he's been director since the late 60s, early 70s, so he's secured that position by which people just expect his films to be good and also feel a little under pressure to say the contrary, as then the film community shunning begins. Or people don't realise that films like The Departed are literally shot-by-shot remakes of older Hong Kong films, but people don't know that. Also, this pressure can skew your viewing experience. For example, I went to watch The Fabelmans after hearing people constantly saying, "This is the film you've all been waiting for 40 years. It's absolutely perfect." And I loved it. It's one of my favourite films from last year. But because of those words, I felt like I wasn't appreciating enough or I was missing something just because I enjoyed it without going insane about it. Killers of the Flower Moon is not a bad film. I'll get into some of its great aspects, but there are also some downsides which I think people are just ignoring. I wish I could find that review I read of a person who described the film as a masterpiece while still admitting that they fell asleep 5 times throughout the film. What do you mean? Step back. Killers of the Flower Moon is based on real events, real crimes that occurred in the 20s in Oklahoma. The Native Americans who lived in the area for a while were some of the richest people on earth thanks to the discovery of oil under their land. This led a lot of people to move to the area, not all with good intentions, and soon after many natives started to die under mysterious circumstances. Leonardo DiCaprio portrays one of the men who moved to the area where his uncle, Robert De Niro, lives and does business, and he ends up marrying a native woman portrayed by Lily Gladstone. And their families become involved in all these dark circumstances. I expected the story to have a more dramatic approach because of the nature of the topic. Instead, it really goes back to Scorsese's crime style, at points gory storytelling which he is most famous for. From Goodfellas to The Departed to Casino, The Irishman, Gangs of New York, whatever the time period, Scorsese loves his gangsters. In Killers of the Flower Moon, there are brutal deaths, investigations into the crimes, friends and rivals and favours and bribes and secrets, and a lot of name. Prepare to be confused in some points because of how many characters are introduced. On the backdrop of all this, there is the native community's question about whether to trust these white people who arrived or not. Since they arrived, everything has gone disastrously wrong, what their real motives are. Greed plays a very important role in this story. And for this, I loved Lily Gladstone's performance. Her character is a woman who suffers so much because of everything happening to people close to her. She is torn between her family wanting her to just stick to her native roots, while she chooses to be with DiCaprio's character. A lot happens which I can't reveal because of spoilers, but basically she is a multifaceted character who Lily Gladstone really honoured. Her acting was raw, realistic, powerful, and I can now see why so many people are eyeing her for an Oscar nomination. DiCaprio, I can't say the same. Many are saying that this is one of his best performances to date, and yes, there are some powerful moments, but he didn't blow me away completely. To me, he just felt like the usual DiCaprio who you could have taken from any other of his films. I much preferred him in The Aviator, The Departed, Django, The Wolf of Wall Street. De Niro is the usual De Niro. Scorsese loves him. He's been putting him in his films for the last 50 years and will keep on doing so. By the way, I read of people saying this is his best performance in the last 25 years, his best performance in decades. Do you know what De Niro has been acting in the last 20 or so years? It doesn't really take that much for it to be better.
Obviously, I've got the bigger 3-wood.
Good, maybe you can use it to hit your balls right into my vagina.
I guess he was good, in some points a little stiff, but I really think Lily Gladstone was the one who stole the scene. You'll also recognise many other famous names in the film: Jesse Plemons, Brendan Fraser, John Lithgow. So a well-rounded cast. There are countless other friends, relatives, co-workers, housekeepers, law enforcement figures, criminals who add to the creation of this world. It's very detailed, nothing is glossed over, every small event is extensively covered, but to the point of really, really dramatic. dragging out the story. Everybody I've spoken to agrees this film is way too long. Way too long. It's nearly 3 hours and a half, and I'm not saying it could have been half the runtime, but close. By the way, why do people get so excited when a long runtime is announced? Like, oh my god, it's 4 hours long, so it's going to be good. What is the connection there? The story does open in a very fast-paced, engaging manner, but while still taking its time to introduce every character, their motives, we start to take sides. But then the central part of the plot goes on this very long tangent in which every scene is dragged out, every dialogue lasts way longer than it should, smaller secondary storylines are introduced with no purpose to the main plot, to only then get the pace back up by the 3rd hour for the grand finale. I understand you need context and nuance and details to introduce a story of this scale. But for example, earlier I was mentioning Oppenheimer, which by the way is Scorsese's big competitor this winter on the award season. Oppenheimer is also over 3 hours long, and again we have countless characters, scientists, relatives, friends, lovers, investigators, lawyers. We have a storyline spanning across decades, and yet the attention is always high. Yes, maybe the final interrogation scenes and final investigation scenes could have been a little shorter, but the editing was incredible, the dialogues went straight to the point, no scene dragged out longer than it should have, and so the 3 hours were well used. In Killers of the Flower Moon instead, there are beautiful shots, especially of the countryside, the oil fields, the houses, the nature, but in some scenes the camera just didn't move away from them. We were watching and watching and watching and watching the same beautiful shot of fire, of a river. Also, I understand that in real life, real dialogues aren't straight to the point and they need context and nuance and details, but that doesn't mean that every single dialogue in the film, for example, between De Niro and DiCaprio, had to be so dragged out and incessant and repetitive. By the way, the beautiful cinematography I was mentioning is by Rodrigo Prieto, who was also the director of photography on Barbie. I love it when they do such different projects.
Just having some brewski beers at my Mojo Dojo Casa house.
He has also worked on many other Scorsese films like The Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, The Irishman, as well as other popular titles like Brokeback Mountain, 8 Mile, 21 Grams. So he definitely has the credentials, and also I think Scorsese likes to keep his fixed collaborators. For example, the editor, Thelma Shoemaker, the editor of Killers of the Flower Moon, has been his editor since basically the beginning of time. Personally, my favourite shots from the film were the ones in which we see the Osage Nations' interpretations of nature, their superstitions, traditions. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you've seen the film, you know what I mean. One thing I found really odd about Killers of the Flower Moon, and which I still have to understand, and maybe you have an answer, is the sound. Because there were many scenes which had a really bizarre sound to them. For example, when the characters are in busy locations, bustling city centres, packed cafes, the background is completely silent and you can only hear the specific character in question speaking. Of course, I know they're not going to include the overall realistic racket in the background, but it just felt so unnatural. And Scorsese is not a rookie, so this was probably not a mistake but a deliberate choice, and I really don't understand why he would make it. Also, still on sound, I expected something a little more from the music department. I think maybe a little more emphasis on it would have helped with the overall pacing of the story. Now, going back to the story, I'm going to say something which might be a little controversial, but I feel like some people refuse to go too harsh on the film because of its topic, because it covers a brutal side of American history which is now being shown to millions around the world. And maybe they feel like criticizing this film translates to downplaying the story, silencing the story. Not everybody, but I'm sure there are people out there who think like this. It's happened already in the past where films are praised not for the film itself, but because of their context. Anyway, all my long ramblings put together come down to the fact that Killers of the Flower Moon isn't a bad film. From a technical point of view, it has great production design, cinematography, the costumes. Is it one of my favourite films of the year? No, it has many downsides, and I think many people will choose not to rewatch this in the future on the level that we rewatch a lot of Scorsese's classics. Will it be big at the award scene? Probably. Scorsese, De Niro, DiCaprio are all loved names on the award scene. I can see a lot of nominations coming their way, maybe not all translate into awards. I'm more confident that Lily Gladstone will go home with some prizes. So those are my thoughts after last night's viewing. I hope I managed to collect them all my contrasting thoughts on the topic, and now I would love to hear what you think about it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.